Knuckles, I would say, also has the same good qualities as that. Although Knuckles has backstories with his ancestors in the game that, again, we're putting a pin on that for another video. We're not getting into it today. But with Knuckles' digging and climbing and gliding abilities, Knuckles has a lot of potential.
Grab your Dreamcast, everyone.
Okay now, as far back as I can remember, I've been living here on this dark island, always guarding the Master Emerald from anything that could harm it. I don't know why I was given this job, why it was my fate, destined to be here forever.
I want you to think about a time where you were, say, really captivated by something that you were enjoying. Maybe you were watching One Piece, sitting at the edge of your seat, rooting for Monkey D. Luffy to save his brother Ace during the war at Marineford. Or perhaps your teeth were sunken deep into the treacherous waters of Moby Dick. Or perhaps you were brought to tears after Aerith, the only person who saw you for who you were, was murdered by your arch-enemy and former partner and soldier while playing Final Fantasy VII. Regardless of the medium and regardless of the tale, you know what I'm talking about. You've definitely had that moment in your lifetime where something you're engaging with really sticks with you for possibly your entire lifetime. Such are the elements that are conveyed through various methods of storytelling to give you a cohesive and rather captivating narrative that draws you in closer. You begin to know how these characters work. You pick up on their motivations and make them your own, and sometimes you pick certain characters that you begin to despise and you begin to count on their failures. As a form of escapism, it begins to become apparent that these characters and their journeys matter to you. But what happens when none of that truly adds up correctly? What happens when there is no chemistry between the characters and their environments? And more importantly for this video, what happens when a character who is fundamental to the entire series in which they take place in relies on that character to function properly? But alas, they don't. Enter Sonic the Hedgehog. It's well documented at this point that Sonic the Hedgehog debuted into the video game market as a global juggernaut. And for a while after the birth of the brutal video game market crash in 1983, Nintendo would go on to dominate the market. All after resurrecting it with regulating the oversaturation of games which led to the crash in the first place. Wow, that was a tongue twister. But to give you an idea of just how big of a fucking deal this was, during the 1980s, the Nintendo Famicom in Japan would sell a whopping 14 million copies, while in the United States, the Nintendo Entertainment System would sell at a fucking 20 million copies. Sega, being a competitor of Nintendo, needed a response to these sales, so in 1989, Sega would release the Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive, which promised higher graphical capabilities and blast processing. But that wasn't enough to peak sales for Sega, at least not to compete against Nintendo. Hence, Sonic the Hedgehog was invented to become the mascot of Sega.
Hey kid, what you doing watching this stupid film? Don't you want to have fun playing Sega?
Sega? Sega who?
Wrong answer, pal. Show him.
It's new, it's wild, it's Sega. International Sega TV games are now here. From Shaw Wallace.
Hey kid, want some more? Yeah!
Unlock your mind.
This little dude, as his games were bundled with the Sega Genesis upon sales, would skyrocket the sales of the Sega Genesis at a staggering 30 million copies. Now, of course, this does not account for the fact that the NES/Famicom would eventually sell at a whopping 61.91 million copies that totaled throughout the 90s along with their sales figures in the 80s. But Sega was not fucking around. What Sega managed to do was prevent Nintendo from becoming a hard-line monopoly in the console market, which is why you're currently seeing Sony and Microsoft toppling both Nintendo and Sega. But Sega was actually doing pretty well for itself for a little while throughout the 90s. But we all know what would come next, as I've already discussed Sega's pitiful decline due to its own foolish business decisions and management. It's no secret that Sega isn't the juggernaut that it once was, dominating the market because of the signature punk rock veneer of Sonic the Hedgehog. But at this point, Nintendo began to make some interesting creative decisions. Donkey Kong Country was released in 1994, and Yoshi's Island came out in 1995. Nintendo was not only expanding on its IPs, but it was also giving depth to the world of the Super Mario Bros. Universe. Even Mario himself, the man of no words in any of the games at this point, had a backstory for the first time where Yoshi was tasked to take care of Mario as his guardian. So then what sold Sonic the Hedgehog was his cool looks and anti-establishment aesthetics, Mario was actually becoming an actual character that people can relate to. Now, of course, this isn't to say that Sega wouldn't follow suit in the same methodology either. After all, the beauty of Sonic is that he is so likable that he's been given a wealth of interpretations by production teams behind the video games, the TV shows, and the comic book series. And oftentimes, these plethoras of universes would be inconsistent with each other. But what they did was not only provide Sonic a personality where he lacked any in the previous variations, but they gave him a relationship with his own unique worlds. Take The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. This is a cartoon that is syndicated throughout the 90s as an attempt to give Sonic a more Bugs Bunny appeal, something that is more cartoony and goofy. This universe has its own set of characters, including Stretch and Grounder, and the jokes and storylines are more akin to slapstick humor. But where The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog lacked any character development and world building, the Saturday morning Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon more than made up for that, and then some. Another example is where the games lacked any dialogue for characters to share between each other. The comics had your back in that regard. And just a personal opinion here, but looking strictly at this era, I can't help but to feel a little depressed. I can't shake off the feeling that here we have a series with some seriously wasted potential. Even within the Archie comic book series, which delve into some dark and deep geopolitical themes and narrative backgrounds, even within the comic book series themselves would spawn several spin-offs which would spell recipe for disaster later down the line, and I will talk about this later on. But as you can see, the pieces of the puzzle are there for a natural progression in the style that Sonic the Hedgehog would evolve into as a franchise, even spawning the birth of several characters that would make up Sonic's friends as well as his enemies. All of these mediums, whether it be the games, the comic book series, or TV shows, each of these had potential to use these characters and what was laid out on the table in terms of narrative and plot points to actually draw in a meaningful and genuine story. And I think that's probably my fault for holding that particular standard to Sega when I should have known better as a kid, but I mean, I was a kid, I wasn't thinking about these things at this point. To be more specific as to what I'm trying to say here is that the comic book series had all of these potential plot points that could have been translated into a video game. And thus, while I felt that the Sonic games were simplistic in their narrative, they could have expanded a lot further. And the comic book series at least demonstrated a little bit of what that could have looked like. Which leads us into the release of the Sega Dreamcast, which would be released in 1998 in Japan and 1999 throughout the rest of the world. For me, the late 90s felt like a party that I was not allowed to attend to, and technically that is correct, given that I was barely in the first grade at the turn of the millennium, but everything coming out of this time felt countercultural with an edge that was previously unheard of. At least for me, that is. It was something that I wanted to be a part of back then, and it's still something I wish I was a part of today. You can say that there's a layer of nostalgia for me hidden within this era.
Sonic! Yo, Sonic! Man, stay off the light speed!
My bad.
I've talked about Sonic Adventure. I just absolutely love this game. It was one of the greatest leaps into 3D for Sonic at the time. I think it's the only great leap into 3D. The first 3D video game I've ever played was Donkey Kong 64 when I went to a friend's house. That was just eye-opening for me because I was very young and I'd only played Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 and like Sonic 3 and Knuckles on the PC. I've never even played the previous Donkey Kong games, but with these Donkey Kong games, it expanded my imagination. It gave me hope that maybe there would be a huge and innovative Sonic story to go by. And so we eventually got that. We got Sonic Adventure 1, and then shortly after we got Sonic Adventure 2. And with that, we got something that I also did not expect with those games. Not only did we get a very expansive world, or at least a promise of an expansive world, but more importantly, we got to play with multiple characters. I think it's a good idea to really hone in on each of the characters and the roles that the characters play, because the characters have personalities and they have an opportunity to develop themselves. Every playable character in Sonic Adventure not only has their own story arcs, but their perspectives are told very strictly from their own point of view. So what this means is that each of the characters have their own dialogue that is uniquely their own. So if you play as Sonic Story Mode, the impression that you'll get from Tails is that he's just your typical sidekick, always supportive of the protagonist and the goals of said protagonist. But if you actually play as Tails in his own story mode, there's a lot more at play here. Tails' dialogue is entirely different as opposed to what you'll see in Sonic's story. In fact, Tails is a lot more confrontational to both Sonic and Robotnik. And yes, I'm going to call him Robotnik. I don't care if you want to call him Eggman. I was born in the US and I was literally brainwashed into believing his name was Robotnik, so fuck you. When you approach Amy Rose for the first time in Sonic's story, Amy is just doing what she always appears to be doing, chasing Sonic around and loading more problems for Sonic that he's just not interested in participating in. But if you actually play as Amy's story, she's actually not all that codependent on Sonic. In fact, she proves herself to be able to stand up for herself against her enemies. And one of my favorite story arcs from Sonic Adventure is where Amy Rose convinces E102 Gamma to question authority. See, there's anarchism in this game, everyone, so now you don't have to give me shit for making this video. Gamma is a robot created by Dr. Robotnik Robotnik with the sole purpose of capturing Froggy because Froggy is holding a Chaos Emerald. Gamma, along with his other brothers, doesn't even know what the value of the Chaos Emeralds are in the first place. It's also important to note that Gamma, as well as his other brethren, are disposable to Dr. Robotnik, especially in the event that all of the other robots are not able to fulfill the tasks that were given to them, and or when the tasks were completed. These robots are thrown aside for scrap. In fact, he doesn't even know why he's trying to take the bird away from Enie. For Gamma, the bird, the frog, and the emeralds are meaningless to him except for giving to Dr. Robotnik, because that is what he was designed to do. And thus, Gamma releases Enie, and by extension becomes defiant against the will of Robotnik. This is why, when Enie blocks Sonic from killing Gamma, she realizes that Gamma is currently going through an unlearning process of the brainwashing programmed into him by Dr. Robotnik. Gamma begins to resent Robotnik so much so that he releases the other birds hidden inside of his brothers, which makes it so emotionally impactful when Gamma, the robot, dies, but the bird within him is free and can live peacefully with the rest of his family. This scene is absolutely beautiful, and while this is very far removed from the main plot of Sonic Adventure, it ends up being one of the most memorable moments in the game. E102 Gamma is born and then he dies in the same game, in the same fucking storyline even. You don't even get to see E102 Gamma at the final story, except for the bird that inhabited E102 Gamma's body that was giving E102 Gamma, the robot, life. And while that does play a major role with Amy's story, which again is another testament as to how powerful the potential of the storytelling in Sonic Adventure could have been, it really showed that there was something there. It truly showed that there was something to be had, and I'm a little disappointed about one particular character, and that is Knuckles the Echidna. Oh no, you thought this video was a mere retelling of the history of Sega and the Sonic franchise. You fool, how mundane of a video that would be. Everyone from Scott the Waz to even your goddamn mother has done one of those already. But what is even less spoken about is how, in spite of all of the ambition Sonic Adventure was in the story department, was the absolute bastardization and train wreck that is Knuckles the Echidna. In this video, I will argue that Knuckles deserves better. Knuckles was robbed of any chance at a dignified character, the utter tragedy that is Knuckles the Echidna. Put on your shoes, because we're going on a wild fucking ride, bitch.
Knuckles is a fucking echidna. No, he is not an enchilada. Although, that does sound really fucking delicious right about now. This is what an echidna looks like. I think the number of that an echidna has is very commonplace information at this point, so instead, I'm going to commit the very grave sin of quoting a Wikipedia article for a much more interesting fun fact for you all to have. It is a challenge to study the echidna in its natural habitat, and they show no interest in mating while in captivity. Prior to 2007, no one has ever seen an echidna achieve. There have been previous attempts trying to force the echidna to eject through the use of electrically stimulated ejection in order to obtain samples, but this has only resulted in the swelling. Yes, those are words arranged into sentences. Real people have been trying to make echidnas until 2007. We live in the bad timeline.
Anyway, Knuckles the Echidna has a very interesting look going for him despite barely resembling a real-life Echidna. And to be fair, Sonic doesn't really look like a real hedgehog anyway. Sorry, buddy.
Knuckles is red with quills that more closely resemble dreadlocks. He also has these really cool red, green, and yellow shoes, and I don't know, I just think those are so awesome. One of my favorite qualities of his are the fighting gloves that he uses that have spikes on them, which to me appear to be far more lethal than that of Brass Knuckles. But he is also seen using these spikes in digging and climbing, hence the namesake. Another interesting fact is that the white crest on his chest was supposed to represent a Nike's logo, but Sega scrapped the idea when Nike wouldn't endorse the game. Knuckles himself is best described as a tough guy. Knuckles is often seen with his chest protruding in a tough guy manner, and Knuckles is best known for his strength. He is often seen breaking rocks, walls, and structures. So then what does Knuckles even do in the games? Well, in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, he makes his debut. It is implied but not seen that Knuckles is guarding the Master Emerald while he is relaxing when suddenly a bomb— Hold on a second. What the fuck is a Master Emerald? Okay, for those who are not autistic like me, the Master Emerald is a giant ass gem that Knuckles is in charge of guarding, reassuring its safety. Its importance lies within the function of neutralizing the Chaos Emeralds. Oh, the Chaos Emeralds? You don't know what the fuck those are? Well, the Chaos Emeralds are emeralds that you collect in most of the Sonic games, sometimes through the special stages and other times through story-driven cutscenes.
Whoa! A Chaos Emerald!
But these emeralds in particular serve two main functions, either to 100% the game, or, more importantly for the main fucking point that we're trying to make in the first place, harness a great deal of power. Sonic himself is often seen using all 7 of the colored jewels to transform himself into Super Sonic, a blatant ripoff of Goku's Super Saiyan form. So essentially, the Master Emerald is intended to function as a nullifier of the power of the Chaos Emeralds, meaning that if that power is being used becomes too great or too dangerous, the Master Emerald is used to calm those fucking titties. But we rarely, if ever, see this happen, but that's what they do. That is what the function of the Master Emerald is supposed to do. Okay, did you get all that? Good, because it's only gonna get more fucking batshit from here, folks. Anyway, following the events of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the Death Egg lands on Angel Island and Dr. Robotnik deceives Knuckles into thinking Sonic and Tails are his enemies, even though Robotnik is the one who is trying to literally run the world into a giant technocratic factory. Wow, he sounds like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos had the worst baby imaginable. Knuckles is seen harassing Sonic and Tails periodically until they clash at Hidden Palace Zone. If you notice the mural, there is an inscription that looks eerily similar to Super Sonic and Dr. Robotnik duking it out in the final fight in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But Knuckles sees this mural as a prophecy, and thus he is wanting to fight Sonic, because in these earlier games, Knuckles is depicted as gullible, not stupid. He was raised to believe in a coming conflict, as foretold in the mural, and Dr. Robotnik took advantage of that narrative purely for his own benefit, entirely utilizing the strategy of divide and conquer.
Oh my god, nobody cares.
Okay, well, I'm not forcing you to watch this.
Skylar, you are overthinking this. Knuckles is just a random enemy. He is functionally no different than that of a wall. For some cases, he is literally just a wall.
Well, no. You have to understand that Knuckles is not just a wall. You see, because of the Sega Genesis's limitation, it didn't allow for spoken dialogue at this point in time. So Knuckles, being a silent character, forces his appearances to drive the story further along with his actions. As the anti-hero of this story, he is actively harassing the protagonist and making things harder for them. And it isn't just random harassment either. He demonstrates an awareness of Sonic Sonic's strengths and weaknesses, and takes advantage of them using his knowledge of the island. He knocks Sonic into the sewers knowing Sonic can't swim, for crying out loud. And when he has that big confrontation with Sonic, he does it in front of this mural. That's characterization. There's also his character in the context of Sonic himself, and the conflict between Sonic and Dr. Robotnik. Sonic roams the world seeking out the Chaos Emerald while Knuckles stays in one place protecting his Master Emerald. Sonic uses his speed to get to places moving horizontally, while Knuckles climbs up and glides around, moving vertically. Sonic is a free spirit doing what he wants. Knuckles is bound by duty. Sonic is blue, Knuckles is red. They are as opposite as you can get, but the conflict between them is false, because their real enemy is Dr. Robotnik. This can be seen as a metaphor for false consciousness and the consequences of said false consciousness.
You know, not everything has to be left as gibberish about how the rich is bad. People hate that, you know.
No, that's just how the game works. You don't need to read Das Kapital to understand what I just explained. Let's see how Knuckles and his characterization translates into Sonic Adventure. As stated before, Sonic Adventure was a leap into 3D, and this time there is dialogue among the characters involved, which means we can directly hear from the horse's mouths on their goals, beliefs, and motivations. No more micro-analyzing 30-second long 16-bit cutscenes.
Good idea!
There, are you happy now?
I'm actually a GigaChad Turbo Alpha Male. I am never happy, only satisfied.
What a miserable way to live. In Sonic Adventure, Knuckles opens his story mode with this monologue.
Back as I can remember, I've been living here on this dark island, always guarding the Master Emerald from anything that could harm it. I don't know why I was given this job, why it was my fate. Destined to be here forever.
So now we have additional context for his motivation in Sonic 3. He is guarding the Master Emerald, but at this point, Knuckles, as well as the player, doesn't know the significance of this emerald yet. As with the general plot of Sonic Adventure, Chaos is released from the emerald, breaking it into shards and scattering it around the world in which the game takes place in. So now Knuckles needs to find these shards and restore the Master Emerald on his altar. While embarking on this journey, he is taken back in time at multiple points where he witnesses various events from his own ancestors. This is Tikal, who in this game plays a similar role to that of Navi from Ocarina of Time. But she is also trying to convince her father to not go to war with the neighboring temple, which is home to these adorable Chow, the Chaos Emerald, the Master Emerald, and of course Chaos himself. And this is important. Knuckles witnesses these moments where Tikal is pleading to her own father to remain peaceful. He witnesses Tikal warning the Chow of the wrath of her father's vigilante coming to pillage them. He witnesses his tribe burning the temple. He is present for all of these extremely generationally traumatic moments perpetrated by his ancestors, and it really makes you wonder, since now we're given dialogue among these Sega Dreamcast furries, if he has anything to say about this.
I'll probably be on this floating island forever, guarding the Master Emerald again. I may not know the whole story behind this, but perhaps it's better that way. I'm at peace once more.
So it ends on a cliffhanger. Big deal. See, Knuckles is a wall.
No, he is not a wall. No. There is a conclusion to all of this. Maybe, somehow, they address it all in the sequel.
Farewell, Knucklehead.
Not if I can help it.
What?
Ah! What was that all about? And look what you did to my emerald!
Oh. Sonic Adventure 2 isn't about Knuckles. It's about edgy goth Sonic and his quest for revenge against the entire human race because one girl got shot by the military. The best they could do is introduce Knuckles to a girlfriend. He immediately loses to edgy goth Sonic in the next game. Nobody cares about this, Skylar. You're wasting your time. You have no life.
Maybe they fixed it in Sonic Heroes.
No worries. We've got this one. Ha! Think I'd miss this? Time to crack that Eggman wide open. Yeah, let's party!
Skylar, I say this as your close personal enemy. You need to get out and touch grass.
I don't even know you, dude. Let's take a look at maybe Shadow the Hedgehog.
Skylar.
Okay.
Skylar, what the fuck is your point?
My point is, shouldn't there be some kind of conclusion to all of the generational trauma?
Like what?
I'm at peace once more.
So that's a bit of a cliffhanger, right? I mean, sure, he's at peace once more, but also he doesn't know much about his past. Like, and neither do we in retrospect.
Because I feel like there should be some more answers. Like, we never see these so-called enemies, and it comes across like the Echidna tribe are the aggressors here. Their only reasoning is that they need to be strong to resist the enemy, but we don't see the supposed enemy. Secondly, if Knuckles is assigned this task to guard the Master Emerald, and he is the only Echidna left, then who assigned him this task if no one else is there to tell him of this history? Clearly, the egg and the hen don't really have an origin story in this particular canon. Clearly, Knuckles himself does not know the answers, and he, as well as the player, i.e. me, are limited in these half-baked cutscenes that are vaguely hinting at some historical atrocity that isn't fully explained. Which is why this cliffhanger at the end of Knuckles' story in Sonic Adventure is so frustrating.
Okay, so you were so traumatized because Knuckles was poorly written by Sonic Team. Boo-hoo! Why don't you just read the comics if you really want a compelling narrative?
You know what? Yeah, let's do that. In fact, they even have a Knuckles spin-off series that we can sink our teeth into. Surely, they can't
Eventually.
Oh my god, they fucked this up!
Hey Sonic, you go on ahead without me. I have some things I need to take care of.
Take a good look at this panel. We will definitely be revisiting this panel again later on. For the meantime, let this question ring in your head. Who are these people? Let's take a moment to assess what we're looking at here. This is Knuckles' Archie comic. This is a spin-off of the Sonic the Hedgehog Archie comic book series. Archie Sonic is so long that it has the world record of the longest comic book series based on a single video game franchise, syndicating from 1993 to 2017. As you can imagine, Sonic Archie comic is super long. It is a massive lore. And keep in mind that this is 2 years after Sonic 1's debut. These are all of the Sonic games that had come out by the Archie comics beginnings. It may look like a lot, but you gotta understand that this predates Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which means that the only Sonic property to really have a fully developed story at this point, if we could even call it that, would be Sonic CD, and maybe even Sonic 2 if we really want to stretch things. So the point I'm making here is that there really wasn't a whole lot Archie could do with Sonic the Hedgehog in 1993, which means they had to be the one to kind of come up with all this shit so their readers can become interested in buying their copies and for them to, of course, buy Sonic games. The Sonic comics began as a sort of Looney Tunes style storytelling, usually episodic slice-of-life tales with Dr. Robotnik as the main antagonist. Ken Penders was hired by Archie because of his son's interest in Sonic the Hedgehog. For much of these years, Ken Penders was the lead writer of the series, up until the staff began working on the Knuckles the Echidna spin-off. And at this point, in the year of 1997, given that the only serious development Knuckles the character ever got was in his debut game, which means that this spin-off is basically supposed to be the fucking Bible for everything we need to know about Knuckles and the various questions we have about him. Why is Knuckles guarding the Master Emerald? Who assigned him this role? Who are the enemies the Echidna are fending off? What I want to know is, does this spin-off meaningfully address these points? And what can we learn from this? As we discovered in Sonic Adventure, Knuckles doesn't really know why he's guarding the Master Emerald. It's a fucking mystery to him. For all we know, he may be saving that gem to be featured in the next episode of Pawn Stars. So what is unknown to Enie and Knuckles
You are not funny.
is what actually motivates Knuckles to the task of guarding and restoring the Master Emerald even more.
Okay, so you know how you just booed to that joke earlier?
Yeah, it was really cringe just like you. Also, why is your hair black? You keep changing your hair color like you're a walking, talking stereotype.
Look, I've been working on this video for like over a year. Cut me at least a little bit of slack.
No one ever cuts us any slack.
It turns out that that song is about why Knuckles is guarding the Master Emerald in the first place.
Unknown from ME, which actually stands for Master Emerald, is lyrically written from the perspective of Knuckles himself, with the Sonic Adventure version being sung in first person, while the sequel, being entirely rewritten, is sung almost in third person.
Born on an island in the heavens, the blood of my ancestors flows inside me. My duty is to save the flower from evil deterioration. Yeah.
As we can see, this matters immensely to Knuckles. He has a sense of duty drawn to this unknown. In fact, he's not even sure of himself, but he also is describing an enemy, an evil deterioration. I will be upfront. This sounds like another word for degeneracy, but I digress for now. We'll talk more about that later. But in addition, he is rather unsure of himself performing this task of guarding and restoring the Master Emerald, as sung in the sequel version. It really makes the listener feel a deep sense of uncertainty in Knuckles' actions, and you can tell that Knuckles himself isn't really all that confident in himself either. Yet, he has to remain strong, even if he isn't fully informed on this duty in the first place. Knuckles doesn't really question things, but he was never really taught to question things. He kind of just takes everything for granted. After all, he spent all of his entire life into the elements that is Angel Island. So then if Knuckles doesn't even know the purpose of guarding the Master Emerald, then why does he still do it?
That's Knuckles, the last of the Echidnas and the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy. He's obsessed with finding the Master Emerald.
Are you serious? The Master Emerald? That's just a bedtime story.
And I think I found the answer. His father. I'll never join you.
If only you knew the power of the Dark Legion. Sega never told you of your father.
They told me enough.
I am your father.
No! We are introduced to Locke, who impregnated Laura Lee, Knuckles' mother, with very specific plans for his son, Knuckles the Echidna. Locke was originally a member of the Brotherhood of Guardians, who were the original protectors of the Angel Island and Master Emerald. Locke, being the sole survivor of the Brotherhood of Guardians, assigned Knuckles the task of being the last Echidna who can hold on to all of his heritage. And in a way, Knuckles was assigned Guardian at birth. Hey Gab, I want to pause and pull back for a few moments here and just take a look at the big picture. I think this premise, if it was just a story about Knuckles discovering his ancestors' lore and fulfilling his purpose as the Master Emerald's Guardian, is a fantastic idea on its own. I mean, this in a way has several ties to the various indigenous cultures that have and continue to suffer so much generational trauma and bloodshed at the hands of settler colonialism. And with Knuckles not even knowing the full scope of his ancestors, the entire part of his purpose being a complete mystery even to him, this resembles the lost and often erased history that is lost to time from the violence committed by colonists worldwide. So in Sonic Adventure, the development team traveled to Guatemala to take pictures, not just for some inspiration, but also to add them as textures in the video game. I admire the aesthetic choices, but it comes at a cost, because the history of the Echidnas isn't really what we thought it was. After all, the Echidnas did kill Chow in Sonic Adventure, right? I mean, I would be hard-pressed to call that an aspect of indigenous culture. In fact, that sounds like something an authoritarian or totalitarian would enact at levels of imperialism. I wonder why. Oh, wait a minute!
I wanted to come clean to all of y'all. I really wanted to come into all of this with no biases whatsoever. I felt that if I had come into this with some preconceptions as to what the meaning of this comic would be, I would be giving an incomplete analysis of this comic, and it would be even unfair, and it would probably even be disingenuous and even disrespectful to whatever the message may be. So I decided to do what I thought was the best choice, and that is to contact the man himself behind this comic, and that is Ken Penders. Ken Penders online has garnered somewhat of a reputation on the internet, especially because of not just his comics, but, well, we'll get into that later. I'm just gonna see what he says. So I wrote him an email. Hey, Ken Penders! This is the second email I'm sending. If you want me to piss off, let me know. No hard feelings, but I still wanted to know some stuff about the Archie Knuckles comic in volume 22 and 23 and such. I don't remember how I phrased it in the previous email, and I don't have a copy of it, so I want to ask out of curiosity. You focused on the themes of fascism in your adaptation of Knuckles the Echidna and his ancestors. In your view, was it pro-fascism or anti-fascism? If neither, why did you pick a centrist position? Is it supposed to be a warning for the readers to take heed of the rise of fascism, or was it meant to be fascism in a vacuum, or just because it's a plot element? I wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, so I figured I'd ask you instead of making assumptions or accusations, and you would appreciate that, haha. I bought one of your volumes when I was a kiddo. It was a comic book store in the Burbank Mall called Dice, and it's no longer there, but I remember them selling a lot of gothic souvenir stuff. It made the rather adult themes in your rendition of the Knuckles comic that much more mysterious. I say adult not as a negative, but as a mature approach to the lore. Please let me know. I'm eager to know and hopeful to learn from you. Best wishes, Skylar. This wasn't the first time I wrote him an email. I wrote one before this and I never got a response, but
Eventually, after writing this email, he did respond, and this is what he said.
I'm sorry I don't recall your previous email, and I can't find a reason why I wouldn't respond either. I'm surprised you thought I took a centrist approach, as I'm definitely anti-fascist. I didn't like the approach the Supreme Court along with the Republican Party were taking then, and I'm certainly less of a fan of them now. I'm more concerned about how the strings are pulled behind the scenes, allowing for certain parties to attain a position of power that result in a danger to the general public. My position is not so much Democrats good, Republicans bad, though there's a lot of truth in that declaration, or the rich exploits the poor, though that's another truism, as it is which corrupt side can be managed and contained better. As recent events bear me out, Democrats have far too many constituencies to police and keep them on an even keel. They have their bad apples and have no problem tossing them overboard. Republicans, on the other hand, have no problem eating their own as long as their self-interests are served. It's no accident why they're the party of rich white guys. The people of Poland were recently faced with a choice of voting for someone who would take Putin's side over the European Union. They remembered in time that Russia has always wanted to subjugate the Polish to Russia's whims and decided they wanted no part of that. Fascism is a danger that strikes when one least expects it, then seizes control before one can do anything about it. I have a habit of not talking down to my readers and felt that they could handle such a storyline. So if you thought I was ignoring you, the reality is I simply hadn't seen your initial query for whatever reason. But I'm responding to you now. Best, Ken Penders.
This is interesting because it tells me that he isn't a centrist. He doesn't really conflate anti-fascists with fascists. He doesn't think they're one and the same. He's not playing horseshoe theory. So at least he has somewhat of a stance here in terms of the topic. Although there is one thing to note about the email that he gave me in particular that I think is a bit problematic, and that is he spent a lot more time talking about the bipartisan similarities of the Democratic and Republican Party, and he didn't really talk about the comic at all. The only thing he really said at all in terms of the comic is that he doesn't really like to speak down to his audience. Given how he talks on Twitter about the comic, I don't really think that's entirely true, but I digress, because I think that was maybe his way of saying that he didn't really want to give away the meaning of the comic. So it is really on me to come away with my own analysis on it, and I'm pretty sure that that's probably what Ken Penders would have wanted me to do in the first place. So with that being said, with my own biases, I'm going to start talking about the comic. This is actually very interesting because there's what I assume to be dingoes here protesting. Very fascist looking echidnas just hanging out like right there. Like literal, whoa, holy shit, no ho? No hoes allowed? And then here's SB all like, Knuckles, this is too political for me. When are we gonna do a ceasefire on Palestine? So there's a clear contrast here between this paragraph and this one. Born to the most noble of echidna houses, the latest to continue in the family heritage and responsibility as guardian of the floating island, defender of all the forces of evil from the world beyond as well as those who would threaten from within. Sounds like the beginning of a classic Sonic story. Robotropolis 3228. During Dr. Robotnik's takeover through roboticization, the SWAT bots came for the foxes, and I did not speak up because I was not a fox. Then they came for the rabbits, and I did not speak up because I was not a rabbit. Then they came for the squirrels, but I did not speak up because I was not a squirrel. Then they came for the hedgehogs, and I did not speak up because I was an echidna. And then they came for me. And by that time, nobody was left to speak up. Yeah, that's a very goddamn on-the-nose parody of a very famous anti-fascist poem. Oh my god, how do I know you guys are on the level about my father? How do I even know you're who you say you are? What kind of a family keeps everything such a secret? My boy! If there's any one thing I regret, it's that we did keep you in the dark far longer than we should have. You have to understand, we did this in your best interest in mind. It's that, and I've been sold a load of what's it say? A load of Mamua?
There's so much more to this than you could imagine.
Try me. Allow me to pull up a chair, as this could take a while. You're asking us to explain over 400 years of family Echidna history. I always hated history. It's nothing but boring old news. How about we talk about my father instead? I want to take a pause real quick to highlight that this is not good story writing, because if your main character is not interested in whatever expedition is going to be dumped on him, then chances are the reader or the audience is not going to be either. So this is already, in a way, dissuading me from investigating further into this lore. But given that this is the 22nd volume of this comic serialization, I may as well give at least a little bit of context before we continue. Stretching back to the very first volume of this mini-series, we learn that there is a whole ass history with the Echidna people. Let's keep it at a SparkNotes level here. That's Dimitri, and that's his son Marineford. Dimitri and his brother Edmund are giving a presentation as to why they should be approved to build this Chaos Siphon, which would drain the energy of the 12 Chaos Emeralds. No, I did not misspeak. I did just say 12 Chaos Emeralds. Yes, I'm confused too. And as a result, would drift the floating angel island back to the surface of the planet. Anyway, this gets denied by the High Council, as Dimitri already tried to confront some of the members of the High Council beforehand, and they were really worried about Dimitri looking like a hero, so they denied it and called it heresy. Sounds like a conflict of interest, but whatever. This eventually results in the death of Dimitri as his son starts mourning over Dimitri's dead body. Dad! What about my dad? And Marineford, who was on the receiving end of the state seizing the Echidna's technology, formed the Dark Legion, not to be confused with the Black Legion, a bunch of fucking Klansmen cosplaying as pirates that even includes members of the Detroit Police Department. Anyway, because of the backlash from the High Council on the Chaos Siphon, the Dark Legion has formed an organization. The Dark Legion operates on the principles of technocratic fascism. What do I mean by this? Well, if it was as simple as the Echidnas, in this case Dark Legion, reclaiming their technology, then it would be really simple to summarize, but it's not. It's a lot more complicated than that. Because the Echidnas are not just scapegoating, outcasting, and marginalizing each other, but they're marginalizing the dingoes as well. Where are you taking me? Haven't you done enough? Let me go! Let me go, I say! Quiet, you pathetic little worm. You'll do what we tell you when we tell you. Can we discuss this? I'm sure we can make a deal.
Deal? You say you want to make a deal? That really amuses me hearing you say that. You sanctimonious hypocrite. Your family hasn't changed one bit. Stir up the crowds to oppose what is rightfully theirs, while your kind control all the fruit of others' labor. Your ancestors never offered me any deal when my brothers and I sought to restore our homeland to the mother world almost 400 years ago. Now it's payback time, and you know what's that?
Yeah, that sounds gay. How much further, Constable? We seem to be taking a long way home. Seems we have a crowd up ahead. They'll just step aside once we get closer. No, they won't. Do you think they have a permit for this sort of thing, sir? We can always bust them if they don't. Jeff, get a gander over there. It's the jackboots. Just hoping I can reason with the cooler heads among the crowd. Attention! If you must protest, please step aside to allow traffic through. What's that? Get back! He just threw a fucking Molotov cocktail at the Echidnas. Oh my god, this shit's getting real, y'all. Okay, but why are the dingoes protesting? The easy answer is racism. The long answer is the way the dingoes are depicted in the Knuckles comic is a little problematic. Comprehended? Yes, but they weren't innovators. They couldn't conceptualize. They could only copy and adapt with what they learned from others. all they could see was that Echidna society was something they wanted. In the comic, they are depicted as bloodthirsty militant guerrilla factions that are hungry for nuclear power. So towards the beginning, they were often seen stealing nuclear weapons from the Echidna society. To stop them, the Echidna society blew up those weapons and created a nuclear fucking goddamn fallout. And in order to save everyone had to go to separate dimensions, meaning Echidnopolis had to be transported to another fucking goddamn dimension. And for some reason, they could only take one group of people, meaning, yeah, after what happened throughout the fallout, the dingoes don't have housing. So now there's a housing crisis, and that is what they're protesting against. I can't put this off any longer. However noble and good my intentions were, I should have thought of Knuckles first and foremost. Much as it pains me to admit it, Laura was right. I really haven't been much of a parent. Maybe certain things worked well in the past, but times have changed, and perhaps I didn't change enough with it. Evidently, the lad isn't here, which is just as well, given how certain I am at what I should say. For one thing, I sincerely doubt simply saying I'm sorry makes up for it. Yeah! General Von Stryker! Begging your pardon, General, but I'm none too proud of Echidna behavior either. What do you say we have a cooling off period between both sides while we figure out how to resolve the problem? By the way, what is the problem?
Too many broken Echidna promises, and I swear, if you and yours don't make good this time, you'll have wished you got rid of us instead.
Hey, are you paying attention? What do you mean I'm autistic? You're the one who's like an hour into the stupid video.
Don't do this, please! I beg you, no!
The way I hear it, the High Council hasn't lifted a finger to speed along the process on constructing houses for dingoes. The election for the High Council are coming up. Whoever gets voted in could either advance or throw a monkey wrench into the program. Let's demonstrate to everyone what the penalty is for betraying our kind. We have no quarrel with you. We just want to be left alone. Show this toad what happens to those who don't support our side.
With terror and intimidation as our weapon of choice, we shall crush any and all resistance. And then, when the citizenry looks for a savior, we shall give them one. Hail Dimitri! Immortal Dimitri! We shall never endure!
I find it fascinating that certain readers get up in arms over the use of the Martin Niemöller quote in Knuckles issue 22, while saying not a word about the main camp quote in Knuckles 23, or the FTR quote in Knuckles 24. Why is that? The fuck did I just read?
I know, right? Oh my god, man. By the way, huge shout out to Questing Refuge, who's been reading all of these timeless Ken Penders classics. Anyway, to address Ken Penders specifically, I don't care if you call yourself an anti-fascist, that doesn't make this better. The problem with having the First Day Came parody is the fact that it is a parody. The people groups listed in the original poem were scapegoats the Nazis specifically targeted. The communists, the socialists, the trade unionists, the Jewish people. And by no means is this a definitive list. After all, they definitely targeted way more people than just those. But these are the people who paid with their very lives because of the slippery slope policies the Nazis were implementing due to their hate and the lies that they were spreading. And what makes the Holocaust so horrific on top of its bloodshed was how the Nazis effectively perpetuated a culture that made killing your own neighbors based on their religious or political background acceptable. Of course, anti-fascism was literally invented during this time as a response to the rise of the Nazi German Party. This is why communists and socialists were listed in that poem, because they were among the first people to respond to the threat of genocide in their country. As time went on, new scapegoats were added to the Nazi propaganda. The media, the banks, the Gentile, the degenerate, the Jews. You see how this is just a slippery slope for endless violence and slaughter. In addition, The group Ken Penders uses aren't even the people groups that are being genocided in the comics. It's really the dingoes and the anti-technology echidnas whom the Brotherhood of Guardians are from, not the squirrels and the hedgehogs. No, Ken Penders, that's a North Korean anime. Not to mention, the Brotherhood of Guardians and the anti-technology echidnas, they too are racist against the dingoes, as stated earlier. It's really fucking complicated, but it's also a fucking incoherent mess that makes it really hard to sympathize with any of the parties involved in this whole situation. And on top of it all, the Mein Kampf quote is why I questioned you in the email as to whether or not you picked a side in that narrative. If you are anti-fascist, Ken Penders, you're gonna have to forgive me for wondering why you dodged the question of addressing volume 22 and 23, because I think the use of the Hitler quote makes it worse. Let me break it down a little bit. In the quote, there is the stab in the back phrase, which is an anti-Semitic rhetorical myth used as an argument to legitimize the violence the Jewish people face. Nazis believed Jewish people were the reason Germany lost the war at a militaristic level, which is absolutely absurd when you take into account that it was a means to repair the nationalistic image that was Germany. And we spoke about this before in a previous video about Christian fascism, but Germany was suffering dramatically due to the loss of World War I. We all know that basic essentials like bread was expensive, and the people that were most affected by this loss were the working class. Anti-Semitic myths like stab in the back when Jewish people already faced centuries of violence in Europe was convenient for billionaires to distract the people from being mad at billionaires, but mad instead at each other. Now, I understand that the person in Ken Penders' comic is Marineford, who is saying this quote. It's an unsympathetic character who founded the Dark Legion and helped drum up this fascist takeover. But we need to keep in mind that the people being written to be the victims in this genocide are also arguably written to be unsympathetic as well, such as the dingoes, who are continuously written to be so fucked up that in the Sonic Archie comic on volume 138, the dingoes created concentration camps for the Echidnas. It literally reduced the Echidna population to 10%, which is why I'm really wondering, is this really the message you want to deliver here? That if we don't genocide certain people groups, that those certain people groups are gonna genocide everyone else? Are you sure that's the message you want to deliver here? Holy shit, bro. Wow. Wow, that was really something. Oh hey, look, I got a red Sega Genesis controller. For all time's sake, let's play some Sonic. Put in an old favorite that my Aunt Carla got me when I was a kid. Sonic 3D Blast. Oh yeah, baby! This is some good old Sega Genesis shitty fucking good vibes right here, y'all. Oh yeah! This right here, so nostalgic. I love this game. Oh fuck. It may not be the best game, but it's pretty solid. I mean, it is what it is. I'm gonna try to go for the Chaos Emeralds. I gotta get 50 rings, and then once I do that, I got to go into the cannonball right here.
Oh no.
What the f- Friends, I'm gonna be honest with you. I am not even the slightest bit interested in giving a full, in-depth analysis of the Knuckles Archie comic. If you want that, go to Loart's channel. He's given you a 9-hour fucking analysis of the whole damn thing, including the Knuckles, the Archie comic, and a fucking 101 course on everything you need to know about Knuckles the Echidna Archie comic with Ken Penders' interpretation of the lore. Since the beginning of this video project I've been working on for over a year now, I have gone on with one mission statement: to wonder who the goddamn fuck Knuckles the Echidna even is. Because at this point in time in the history of Sonic the Hedgehog in general, no one has really made an attempt to interpret Knuckles as a character in terms of his ancestry and his purpose for guarding the Master Emerald. No matter what, Ken Penders was the one who took that job. He took it because he was writing for Archie. Eventually, Ken Penders would leave Archie Comic, and eventually shit would go down, not just with Knuckles, but with the entire Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. And my argument for this whole video is that Knuckles was the one domino that made the entire continuity of Sonic the Hedgehog come crumbling down.
Thanks a lot, pal. I owe you one. I think we're even.
It's incredibly uncanny how time flies so fast as you grow throughout your life. Because that story I told Ken Penders at the end of my letter is a true story. It really happened. And I just want to recap that these are memories that I had since I was probably about 7 years old. This is literally me when I was 7 years old. I was this young.
When you were 6 years old, were you happy? Were you happy? I was happy.
My grandmother and my cousin went to the Burbank Mall and we visited a myriad of stores, and one of them just happens to be a comic book shop. I do want to make one small correction and say that the store that I visited was probably not called Dice, but that Dice was a store that happened to be right next to the comic book shop where I got this issue of the Knuckles Archie comic. And like I stated earlier, prior to being exposed to the comic, my exposure to who Knuckles the Echidna even was very limited. And if you put yourself in my shoes, you can then kind of understand why my kid self would take this as an authoritative source as to who Knuckles is and what defines Knuckles as a character. Because in comparison to extrapolating the lore from the video games, reading the Archie comics is like reading the Bible. You're not just getting 16-bit cutscenes, you're getting dialogue, you're getting history, you're getting lore, you're getting in-depth character analysis, and most importantly, you're getting some kind of explanation as to why these characters exist and what these characters' motivations are in the first place, down to its very root. And I want to reiterate, this is not how I feel about the Knuckles Archie comic today. Instead, this is just how I felt in the 1990s when the comic was being originally syndicated. I remember reading these specific pages that you're seeing right before you and thinking to myself, wow, wouldn't it be cool if this was in the game? Wouldn't it be cool if there were actual cutscenes of all of this crazy shit in the game? And Sonic Adventure was the closest thing we ever got to that. Well, kind of. But we'll get to that. I don't want to blow my load too early, folks. But because of all of this Knuckles the Echidna exhibition that I was exposed to from the Archie comic and Sonic Adventure 1, I really started to pay attention to Knuckles because I really wanted to see how this character was going to be fleshed out throughout the series as time went on. Because if Sonic Adventure was going to be so ambitious to include voice acting, animated cutscenes, and even the Echidna tribe, then surely the games that will follow are gonna be just as, if not more ambitious as time goes on. Sure, Sonic Adventure 2 was more focused on Shadow the Hedgehog's introduction and his backstory, but at that point I was willing to accept that, because Shadow's another developing character, and Knuckles is just inhabiting that world where Shadow exists. And I remember being in middle school hearing the announcement for Sonic Heroes coming out later that year, and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, it's the Chaotix. Holy shit, we're actually going to get some answers for a change. Because after all, Vector, Charmy, and Espio were in the side comic. Clearly, there has to be a link between Sonic Heroes and the Archie Knuckles comic. But to my dismay, that was unfortunately not the case, as the game was narratively more two-dimensional than its adventure predecessors. I mean, I got more fulfillment in Roger Vanderway's Sonic movie Madness than I did from Sonic Heroes.
Hey, I could beat up that guy like that, the little wiener. He is no match for the great Marineford.
Say, Mary, you can duel me if you want to prove how incredible you are.
No fair!
But okay, they have to be building up to something, right? The next game has to do something with this concept. Something, like anything. Oh, more Shadow the Hedgehog, and we're giving him a gun. Okay. There's this white hedgehog known as Silver, and Princess Elise kissing Sonic. Oh my god, okay. You see where I'm going with this. This would never be revisited again. And if I'm going to be quite honest with you, I'm a little heartbroken. It is basically an internet meme just how much of a mess the Sonic the Hedgehog lore truly is. And even as a lifelong Sonic fan myself, I gotta admit that it is honestly well deserved. People for decades now have been complaining how there is absolutely no continuity between the games, let alone any of the other properties that Sonic the Hedgehog lies under. I mean, yeah, it is a little weird that Sonic Lost World on the Nintendo Wii U as an entire video game happens to have the same name as an actual Sonic Adventure level. So this is to say that it seems, in my point of view, that Sega is not interested in taking the Sonic the Hedgehog continuity seriously, and who knows if it ever truly was. This was the point that I was trying to make in my video about how Sega does not deserve the Sonic IP. Because of course we have to remember that Sega is first and foremost a corporation. And contrary to what Mitt Romney may say about corporations, corporations are not people, and their only interest is primarily into making profits. It doesn't matter if the game has any consistency with the rest of its own continuity. If Sega and Sonic Team make money from it, that's it. That's the bottom line. That's all that it matters to them. This means that Sega has absolutely no incentive whatsoever to give Knuckles a dignified character development. Let me explain what I mean by talking about a Nintendo DS game called Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. To the YouTube user JBBC2RY, I hope you understand now why I didn't fully answer your question in my questions and answers video, because I was saving it for this video. "4,000 years ago, Nocturne was a paradise. We believed in science and industry, and we flourished. With our prototype Gizoids, we forced our rivals, the clan of the mighty Pakamak, to its doom. But in our moment of triumph, a dark force wrenched us from our home, imprisoning us in this nightmare dimension. Since then, I have warred against the other denizens of this dimension. Bloodthirsty, evil races bent on conquest and mental domination. We had to change and adapt to become who we are today. We had to become perfect. So already, we're starting to see some very interesting developments in this game. For those who don't know, Pakamak is T'Challa's father, the person who tried to wage war on that said undisclosed group of people. After all, we talked about how this was paramount for them getting the Chaos Emeralds and burning down the temple where the Chao and Chaos reside. The Nocturnus clan's goal were to, as you probably have guessed it by now, conquer the world. Although I don't think this justifies violence against innocent Chao to get the Chaos Emerald, although this is a prime example of violence begetting violence, it does explain why the Echidna tribe were trying to harness the Chaos Emerald's power in the first place. Even though it is an unsatisfactory answer, it is at least an answer. So not only does this narrative attempt to tie with the Sonic Adventure game, but it also attempts to tie with Sonic Battle as well because of the Gizoid. I don't want to get into the whole lore of Sonic Battle, but TLDR, Dr. Robotnik finds a Gizoid robot and eventually he learns to harness its power, while Sonic and Tails are trying to liberate this Gizoid from Dr. Robotnik, as this Gizoid is an ancient piece of technology. I'm purely going based on memory here because it's been almost 2 decades since I played it last time, but that's pretty much the relevant plot summary for this video. Also, it's a little strange that E102 Gamma is in the game even though he died in Sonic Adventure 1, but whatever. This is Shade. She is an Echidna from the Marauder forces of the Nocturnus clan. And this weird dimension that they were sucked into is called the Twilight Cage. So in the game, Shade escaped from the Twilight Cage to steal the Master Emerald, all in an attempt to save her and her friends in the Nocturnus clan. But it was this one really weird looking character named Ix who stole the Master Emerald, and he planned to literally wage a fuck-all war on the planet Earth to conquer it. Completely disillusioned by this, Shade is not down for this. So she, Sonic, Knuckles, and all of the friends go and stop Ix from, conquering the world. Typical Saturday morning cartoon bullshit, y'all. Afterwards, everyone returns home to the planet Earth, and it turns out that several years has passed while they were out doing their adventure, and Dr. Robotnik has already taken over the world, thus ending the game on a cliffhanger, meaning that there would have been a sequel to this game. But there wasn't. Now, I can already hear what some of you are saying. There's a lot of interesting parallels between this game and the Archie comic. The Dark Brotherhood, being a militaristic, clone-like cult of Echidnas, holds a lot of striking similarities to the Dark Legion. Shade the Echidna holds a lot of similarities in her role as a character to Julie Sue, an Echidna who is Knuckles' girlfriend, and I didn't mention her by name earlier, but she's this one. Just like how Shade was a member of the Dark Brotherhood, Julie Sue used to be a member of the Dark Legion. And of course, the Twilight Cage holds some resemblance to the Twilight Zone, which the Echidnas were sent to after the nuclear fuck fallout. Also, I just need to say this real quick before somebody commits arson in the comment section. I am not saying that these two things are exactly the same thing. I'm just saying there are some similarities in their likeness, and there's not really anything wrong with that. It's just an observation, a subjective one, a harmless one at that. I think some of you are a little too invested into this, a little bit more invested into this than I am, and maybe it's one of those moments where you need to touch a little bit of grass every once in a while. Hey, sometimes I need to touch grass, okay? It's part of being an adult, and it's also part of trying to keep your mental health in check. So a few weeks after this game was released, Ken Penders started copywriting a lot of his creations, and then of course, there was a lawsuit that ensued. Ken Penders Julie sued. Oh my god. You see, a long time ago, Ken Penders hinted that he was going to make a Mobius 25 Years Later syndication, which would be released 25 years later from the actual syndication of the original Archie comics in the first place, which is why he was starting to copyright his characters and concepts. So in fall of 2010, Archie filed a lawsuit against Ken Penders for this. They tried to keep it just between them, but the lawsuit got so fucking out of hand, Ken Penders would file his own lawsuit against Sega and EA Games, which also owned BioWare. This secondary lawsuit took place in 2011. BioWare had experience working on Mass Effect, and this was their first handheld game. In 2013, Ken Penders won the lawsuit with Archie and got a settlement and the rights to over 200 characters in the comics, which includes characters like Julie Sue, which made it easier for Ken Penders to file that lawsuit against EA and Sega. However, the second lawsuit did not go as Ken Penders planned, especially after multiple appeals. The judges continued to uphold these decisions over and over and over again, so Ken Penders couldn't really do anything in terms of Sega and their use of these characters. Regardless, this affected the Archie comics so dramatically that there were hundreds of characters that were completely retconned from the series, although Ken Penders has stated this is completely unnecessary. Ken Penders has also been interested in a potential lawsuit because of Sega's second Sonic movie. He states that there's a character similar to Locke, which is Knuckles' father, and he wants to sue for that reason. And this is the first time outside of Ken Penders' Archie comics that Knuckles had a father. Not to mention the use of the Echidna tribe once again, although be a different version of the Echidna tribe. Alright, so that's a lot of information within the course of 5 fucking minutes, so what do we make of this? I think the first thing we need to keep in mind is that this is the reason why there is no sequel to Sonic Chronicles. Even though Ken Penders hasn't been successful at any lawsuits against Sega and EA, it can be speculated that there's no sequel because they don't want to spend more money on more lawsuits. This is a very interesting dynamic, and I want to really elaborate on this. The public perception of Ken Penders has definitely soured over the years, and rightfully so, because these lawsuits give an implication that Ken Penders is putting Sonic's characters and intellectual property as hostages. It is very, very dangerous for them to write new stories, especially with the pre-established story elements. So I can understand why people don't like Ken Penders, because it seems like, from the point of view of the fandom, that Ken Penders is attempting to stop Sega and their development teams from making new Sonic games with these plot devices. But I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate for a second and just kind of give you some food for thought. Ken Penders is working class. He's not a CEO, he's not the owner of some faceless corporation. He put his blood, sweat, and tears into the Archie comics. I'm only mentioning this because it is important to look at this from a dialectical perspective. In my opinion, I think there is some legitimacy of fans of Sonic the Hedgehog getting mad at Ken Penders. On the other hand, however, we need to remember that this problem extends the scope of Ken Penders himself, and that this is a systemic problem that the structure of copyright and intellectual property reinforces. Sega is a union-busting company, and I am not in any interest of defending Sega as a corporation for their ownership of Sonic the Hedgehog. Fuck that. But on the other hand, Ken Penders is literally using his characters for NFTs. Granted, he has the right to do so, but it's kind of fucked up because NFTs are pretty bad for the environment. I'm trying to be as impartial as possible, and I'm also not a lawyer, so I can't really weigh in on these things from a legal perspective. I'm only weighing in on this as a fan. I guess what I'm saying is don't hate the player, hate the game that the player is playing, I guess. Look, I'm not here to simp for Ken Penders. What I'm here to do is to discuss Knuckles the Echidna. And no matter how I feel about these myriads of lawsuits that took place, whether you root for Sega or Ken Penders in this case, at the end of the day, we have to really lay down the ultimate verdict here and say that Sega, at all levels, has completely fucked up with Knuckles the Echidna. Ken Penders has stated that Archie and Sega in the earlier years was very hands-off to the whole process of writing these characters. So no matter what, that fault is on Sega there. And that's where we need to ask the ultimate question: who the goddamn fuck is Knuckles the Echidna? Who is he? Is Knuckles black? Is Knuckles Mesoamerican? Is he a Nazi? Is he buff? Is he dumb? Is he loyal? Is he just a racist stereotype? At the end of the day, they really, really, really fucked it up with Knuckles so badly that it ended with various lawsuits, and as time went on, it got worse and worse and worse, to the point to where we're all kind of just wondering, hey Sega, what the fuck are you gonna do with Red Sonic?
So you're telling me that you were triggered with a capital T by Ken Penders?
Aren't you like literally the comic book guy?
No, I'm the comic relief guy.
Comic relief guy, come get your chicken tenders!
Call me Mom.
Okay then. You know what? This is ending on somewhat of a bittersweet note. And I think that kind of just sucks a lot. I was hoping that by the end of this, I would be able to say, this is who Knuckles is, like definitively. But I don't think I can really do that, because every time that Knuckles has been attempted to be defined, it's always either thrown away or it's some really shitty thing. And the other major question that I have to ask myself here is, do I really like Sonic Adventure? For the past 25 something years, I have told my friends and my family, loved ones, acquaintances, absolute strangers, people on the internet, that I love Sonic Adventure unconditionally. And I don't think I can do that anymore. Sonic Adventure is a great game because it has kick-ass music. The graphics are very beautiful looking, even especially for the time that it came out in. I compare the voice acting to something akin to a B-rated movie that you would find in a really shitty back alley theater. Like if Tommy Wiseau made a video game, it would be Sonic Adventure 1 on Dreamcast. And I say that because the lines are absolutely funny.
Yeah! Super Sonic must have neutralized it, so it's nice again.
Super Sonic. No, he's right there. But at the same time, all that comes at a cost. It is a small piece of a much larger mess that is the whole damn Sonic franchise. And Knuckles was the one domino that really just fucking made the whole thing a trash fire. I'd like to be optimistic, however, and hope that maybe Ian Flynn will draw a better continuity for Knuckles the Echidna. Maybe he already has, because I have not really checked IDW. I'm kind of burnt out at this point. Can you blame me? This video took longer than a year to make. And I guess that this video mattered so much to me because it's something that I feel like my younger self, my younger 7-year-old self would appreciate watching.
Have a good day for your birthday?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
And how old are you going to be for your birthday?
7.
I feel like my younger 7-year-old self would have appreciated having the band-aid ripped right off, having somebody say, these fucking faceless corporations are not going to address this. These faceless corporations do not give a damn about the characters that you love so damn much. It's a joke. It's a laughingstock. The whole damn thing's a laughingstock. The entire internet knows it. I think, however, for a lot of Sonic fans, we kind of embrace that as a laughingstock and a trash fire at the same time. I think my relationship to Sonic as a whole has changed because I tend to look at Sonic as something to laugh at rather than to take very seriously. And that's what I tried to do with this Knuckles video, is take it very seriously, because a lot of the time it is just absolutely trying to be serious. It's not doing a great job of it. They fucked up in the past, and I'm hoping that maybe they will continue to push forward to do better. Like I said, I have not read the IDW comics, so I don't know if this problem has already been fixed in the IDW comics. I do know that Ian Flynn worked on Sonic Frontiers, and I'm almost done finishing the DLC, The Final Horizon. So I don't know if there's anything really that has been addressed in there, and honestly, I might just make Sonic Frontiers its own video someday, I don't know. But on the off chance that maybe Ian Flynn is watching this video and I have a chance to deliver a message to Ian Flynn, I'd like to make a request. And that is, if you're gonna write any kind of character background for Knuckles, at the very, very least, don't culturally appropriate something into Knuckles. Sega has tried to do that forever, and every time they fail. Make Knuckles a lovable character. Give him some flaws, but also give him flaws that he grows from. If Knuckles has an ancestry, make it cohesive to the rest of the universe in the Sonic franchise. Don't make it some fake Mesoamerican culturally appropriated bullshit. Don't make his ancestors literal fascists. Make it something that makes actual sense. But even in spite of all this, I do feel hopeful for the future. I'm hoping that maybe the next titles that do come out are consistent, are coherent. But that's something that has remained to be seen. But until next time, yo, game on.
leaving us there, Knuckles?
Yeah, that's one more job I won't get paid for, but I've known you for a while, so I'll just put it on your tab, and you can pay me back later on.
So are you going back to treasure hunting now?
Of course! Finding treasure is my absolute favorite pastime.